During Christmas dinner, my sister announced she was the favorite. The words hit me like a slap across the face. Right there, in front of everyone, with the turkey getting cold and my grandmother's china rattling from the silence that followed. What do you do when the person you've shared a childhood with throws a grenade into your family Christmas? When 28 years of memories suddenly feel like lies? If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your own family, hit that like button because this story is about to get darker than anyone expected. And please, subscribe and comment below. I need to know I'm not alone in this mess, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my family forever. Let me take you back to 3 days ago. December 22nd. The snow was falling outside our childhood home in Ohio, and I was actually excited for once. I'd driven 4 hours from Cincinnati with my husband Mike and our twin boys, Tommy and Jake, who are 6. The car was packed with presents, homemade cookies, and this naive hope that maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would be different. You see, my sister Claire and I have always had this tension. She's 31, 3 years older than me, and somehow she's always managed to make me feel small. Even as adults, even when I have my own family, my own career as a nurse, my own life that I'm proud of. But something about being back in that house, in those childhood bedrooms, brings out the worst in both of us. I should have seen the signs from the moment we walked in. Mom was in the kitchen, her apron covered in flour, stress lines deeper than I remembered. Dad was in his recliner, already 3 beers in even though it wasn't even noon. And Claire? Claire was holding court in the living room, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood as she gestured dramatically with a glass of wine. "Oh, Amber's here," she said when she saw me, not getting up from the couch, not even looking at Tommy and Jake, who were practically vibrating with excitement to see their aunt. "How was the drive in that interesting car of yours?" "My Honda Civic." She was talking about my Honda Civic like it was held together with duct tape and prayers. Meanwhile, her BMW was parked in the driveway like a shiny monument to her success as a pharmaceutical sales rep. "The boys were great," I said, forcing a smile. "They've been talking about Christmas at Grandma and Grandpa's house for weeks." Claire took a sip of her wine. "Well, hopefully they'll behave better than last year. Last year, when 6-year-old Tommy accidentally knocked over one of Mom's decorative snowmen. He'd cried for an hour, and I'd spent the rest of the visit walking on eggshells, making sure my kids didn't touch anything, didn't laugh too loud, didn't exist too much in Claire's presence. Mike squeezed my hand. He sees it too, has seen it for years. "Boys, why don't you go find Grandma in the kitchen?" he suggested. "I bet she has some of those Christmas cookies ready." As Tommy and Jake raced off, their little voices echoing through the house, Claire rolled her eyes. "They're so energetic." "They're children, Claire. They're supposed to be energetic. Some children know how to control themselves." And there it was. The dig. Always a dig. Because Claire doesn't have kids. Claire has her career and her condo downtown, and her boyfriend Derek who makes 6 figures and drives a Tesla. Claire has the life that Mom always said was smart and responsible. The first day passed like it always does. Awkward small talk. Mom fussing over Claire's outfit, her hair, her latest promotion. Dad asking me about the nursing thing like I haven't been doing it for 8 years. The boys trying so hard to be good, to be quiet, to not give Claire any ammunition. But I could feel it building. That familiar pressure in the air, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Claire kept making these little comments about my parenting, about Mike's job as a teacher. Such noble work, so modest. About our decision to buy a house in the suburbs instead of staying trendy and urban. Christmas Eve was when things started to unravel. We were sitting around the tree, the boys, finally asleep upstairs when Dad brought out the photo albums. Every year he does this, goes through old Christmas pictures, tells the same stories. But this year, something was different. "Look at this one," Dad said, holding up a picture of Claire and me when we were maybe 8 and 5. We're both in matching red dresses, but Claire's hair is perfectly styled and she's smiling angelically at the camera. I'm in the background, chocolate on my face, reaching for something off camera. That's my girl, Dad said, tapping Claire's face in the photo. Always so put together. Claire preened. Actually preened. Some things never change. What about this one? Mom pulled out another photo. Claire at her high school graduation, valedictorian, medal around her neck. Dad's arm around her shoulders, both of them beaming with pride. I remember that day. I remember standing to the side, holding Mom's purse, watching them pose for picture after picture, watching Dad's face light up in a way that I'd been chasing ever since. And here's when Claire got her first promotion, Mom said, flipping to a more recent photo. We were so proud. Remember how we celebrated at that fancy restaurant downtown? Remembered. I remembered because it was the same week I'd graduated from nursing school. The same week nobody mentioned my accomplishment because Claire's news was so much more exciting. Mike's hand found mine again. He was watching my face, seeing the old hurt resurface like it always does during these family gatherings. What about Amber's graduation? He asked quietly. From nursing school? Mom blinked. Oh, well, of course we were proud of that too. But there was no photo. No special dinner, no celebration that I could remember. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom with Mike beside me and the boys in sleeping, bags on the floor, I stared at the ceiling and wondered why I kept doing this to myself. Why I kept coming back, hoping for something that was never going to happen. You okay? Mike whispered. Just, family stuff. She's jealous of you? I turned to look at him. What? Claire. She's jealous. You have everything she wants. A husband who adores you. 2 amazing kids. A purpose in your work. She has money and success. But you have a life. I wanted to believe him. But lying there in the dark, surrounded by the remnants of my childhood, it felt like Claire had always been the one with everything. Christmas morning started out beautifully. The boys were up at dawn, their excitement infectious. Even Claire smiled watching them tear into their presents. For a moment, it felt like maybe we could just be a normal family. But then came the gift exchange between the adults. Claire handed me a small, expensively wrapped box. Inside was a gift card to Target, $25. I gave her a handmade photo album I'd spent weeks putting together, filled with pictures of our childhood, our family, memories I thought she'd treasure. She barely looked at it. Mom gave Claire a beautiful silk scarf from Nordstrom. She gave me a set of dish towels. Dad handed Claire an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note that said, "For my successful daughter." He gave me a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest nurse." I felt Mike tense beside me. Felt the boys looking back and forth between the adults, sensing the tension even if they didn't understand it. "This is so generous, Dad," Claire said, waving the check. "Derek and I can use this for our trip to Europe." "You deserve it, sweetheart. You've worked so hard." The words hung in the air. I've worked hard too. I work 12-hour shifts at the hospital, come home to cook dinner and help with homework and do laundry and all the things that keep a family running. But apparently that's not the kind of work that gets recognized in this house. We moved to the dining room for Christmas dinner. Mom had outdone herself, turkey, ham, all the sides, her famous apple pie for dessert. The table was set with the good china, candles flickering, everything picture perfect. For a while, we managed normal conversation. The boys talked about school. Mike shared some funny stories from his classroom. Even I relaxed a little, thinking maybe we'd make it through without any major drama. That's when Claire stood up. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, raising her wine glass. Everyone looked up, expectant smiles on their faces. To family, Claire began, and to finally being honest about something that's been obvious for years. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I know we're not supposed to talk about these things, but I think it's time we acknowledge the truth. I'm the favorite child in this family, always have been. And honestly, I deserve to be. The silence was deafening. Mom's fork clattered to her plate. Dad's face turned red, but not from embarrassment, from something else. Something that looked almost like pride? Claire, Mom whispered. No, it's okay, Mom. We all know it's true. Look at the evidence. Who got the better Christmas presents? Who gets the phone calls asking for advice? Who do you brag about to your friends? It's not Amber with her little nursing job and her chaotic life. It's me, the successful one, the one who made something of herself. I couldn't breathe, literally could not get air into my lungs. 28 years of feeling like I wasn't enough, and here she was, confirming every insecurity I'd ever had about my place in this family. Claire, that's enough, Mike said, his voice tight with anger. Is it, though? Amber, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you haven't felt it every family gathering, every phone call, every holiday. Tell me you don't see the difference in how they treat us. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because she was right. And she was wrong. And I was drowning in the space between those two truths. Tommy looked up at me with his big brown eyes. Mommy, why is Aunt Claire being mean? That's when Dad finally spoke. Claire Elizabeth Morrison. His voice was cold, colder than I'd ever heard it. Claire's face went from triumphant to uncertain in seconds. Sit down. Now. Claire sat, but her chin was still raised defiantly. I'm just being honest, Dad. Isn't that what families are supposed to do? Dad pushed his chair back from the table, stood up slowly. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. You want honesty, Claire? Let me give you some honesty. And what he said next shattered everything I thought I knew about my family, my childhood, and the sister I'd spent my whole life feeling inferior to. Dad's eyes were steel as he looked at Claire, then at me, then back at Claire. The candlelight flickered across his face, making him look older, more weathered than I'd ever seen him. You think you're the favorite, Claire? You think all those gifts, all that attention, all that praise means you're loved more? Claire's confidence wavered, but she lifted her chin. The evidence speaks for itself, Dad. The evidence. Dad laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter, hollow. You want to know what the evidence really shows? Mom reached across the table. Robert, please. No, Linda. She wants honesty? She's going to get it. Dad's hands were shaking as he gripped the back of his chair. Claire, every expensive gift I've given you, every check I've written, every time I've bragged about your job and your success, it wasn't because I loved you more. It was because I felt guilty. The word hung in the air like smoke. Guilty. Guilty. For what? Claire's voice was smaller now, uncertain. Dad closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, he was looking directly at me. Amber, do you remember when you were 7 and you got pneumonia? You were in the hospital for 2 weeks. I nodded slowly. Of course I remembered. I'd been so scared, so sick. But what I remembered most was being alone. You and Mom could barely visit because of Claire's piano recitals and her honor society meetings. That's not why we couldn't visit. The room went silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. We couldn't visit because I was having an affair. Mom gasped. Actually gasped like she'd been punched. But then I realized this wasn't news to her. The gasp wasn't surprise. It was pain, old and deep, being ripped open again. Dad, I whispered. With my secretary at the law firm. It had been going on for months. And during those 2 weeks, when you were fighting for your life, when you needed your father most, I was with her. Planning to leave your mother. Planning to leave all of you. Claire's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. The sound was sharp, final. I chose that woman over my sick 7-year-old daughter. Dad continued, his voice breaking. I missed seeing you take your first real breath without the oxygen mask, because I was in a hotel room with someone who wasn't your mother. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I couldn't speak. 21 years? 21 years I'd believed my parents just couldn't make time for me because Claire was more important. But you came back. I managed to whisper. I came back because you almost died. Dad's shoulders shook. The night your fever spiked to 104, when the doctor said they didn't know if you'd make it, your mother called me. She didn't know about the affair then, but she knew something was wrong with us. She said, Robert, I don't know what's happening to our family, but our daughter needs her father. He sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. I drove to that hospital and I saw you lying there, so small in that bed, asking for me in your sleep. And I realized I'd been about to throw away everything that mattered for someone who wouldn't even visit me in a hospital. Mom was crying. Now too, quiet tears that she kept wiping away with her napkin. I ended the affair that night. But the guilt. God, Amber, the guilt ate me alive. Every time I looked at you, I remembered how I'd failed you when you needed me most. So I overcompensated. With Claire. What? Claire's voice was barely audible. I showered Claire with attention and gifts and praise because I thought if I could be the perfect father to one of you, maybe it would make up for how badly I'd failed the other. I thought if I could point to Claire's success and say, look what a good father I am, maybe I could forget about the nights you cried for me and I wasn't there. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture I never could have imagined. All those years of feeling forgotten, of watching Claire get everything while I got scraps. It wasn't because she was better. It was because Dad couldn't bear to look at what his choices had cost me. But Amber, Dad turned to me, his eyes red with tears. You became everything I should have taught Claire to be. You became compassionate because you knew what it felt like to hurt. You became strong because you had to be. You chose a career helping people because you remembered what it was like to need help and feel alone. I looked at my boys, sitting wide-eyed and confused at this adult drama unfolding around them. Tommy had moved closer to Mike, who had his arm around both kids now. Every day I watched you grow into this incredible woman, a loving wife, an amazing mother, someone who dedicates her life to healing people, and I knew that you'd become who you are despite me, not because of me. And I was too much of a coward to face what that meant, so you just kept buying Claire things? The words came out harsher than I intended. I kept trying to create a success story that would prove I was a good father. But look what it did. Dad gestured at Claire, who was staring at the broken glass at her feet like she'd never seen anything like it before. I turned her into someone who thinks love can be measured in dollar amounts, someone who thinks being the favorite is something to brag about instead of something to be ashamed of. Claire finally looked up. You don't really think I'm better? Honey, I think you're lost. Dad's voice was gentle now, sad. I think I spoiled you so badly trying to ease my own conscience that I forgot to teach you what actually matters. And I think you've spent so many years believing that material success equals worth that you don't know how to value the things that really count. Like what? Claire's voice was small, broken. Dad pointed at me. Like the way Amber held your hair when you had food poisoning in college. Like how she drove 6 hours in a snowstorm when you had that panic attack last year. Like how she made you that photo album full of memories because she thought you'd want to remember when we were all happy together. I remembered that panic attack. Claire had called me at 2 a.m., sobbing, saying she felt like she was dying. I'd left Mike with the sleeping boys and driven through one of the worst storms of the year to sit with her in her pristine condo while she shook and cried. Amber has spent her entire adult life trying to love you despite feeling like she could never measure up to you, Dad continued. And you just stood up at my dinner table and basically told her she was right to feel that way. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Mom was still crying quietly. The boys were whispering to Mike, asking if we were all okay. Claire was staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. I didn't know, Claire whispered finally. About the affair? I figured Mom told you years ago. Claire shook her head. About why? About the guilt. About Amber. She looked at me with eyes I'd never seen before. Not the cold, superior look I was used to, but something raw and confused and maybe, possibly regretful. I always felt like I had to be perfect. Like if I wasn't achieving, if I wasn't successful, if I wasn't the best at everything, then you'd stop loving me. So when you gave me money and praised my job and showed me off to your friends, I thought that meant I was doing it right. And I thought if I gave you enough things, I could make up for the fact that I'd been willing to abandon you when you were 10 years old, Dad said quietly. The truth was settling around us like dust after an explosion. All these years, we'd all been wrong about everything. Dad thought buying Claire's love would erase his guilt. Claire thought being perfect would keep her safe from abandonment. I thought I wasn't enough because I could never compete with perfect. And Mom? I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw someone who'd been carrying secrets for 21 years. Mom, did you know? About the affair? Mom nodded, not looking up from her lap. I found out 6 months later. Found some hotel receipts in his coat pocket. Why didn't you leave him? Because you'd just recovered from pneumonia, and Claire was struggling in school because she'd been so worried about you. And I couldn't break apart what was left of our family when we were all just barely holding together, another piece of the puzzle. Claire had been struggling because she was worried about me. The perfect, composed sister I remembered from that time had actually been falling apart? I was so scared you were going to die, Claire said suddenly, looking at me for the first time since Dad's revelation. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. All I kept thinking was that I'd been so mean to you the week before you got sick. We'd fought about, God, I don't even remember what, something stupid, and I thought maybe that's why you got so sick because I'd been awful to you. Claire, I started trying to be perfect after that. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect everything. Because I thought if I was good enough, bad things wouldn't happen to our family anymore. I thought I could control it. We were all broken. Every single one of us, sitting around this beautiful Christmas dinner table with our good china and our candles and our turkey getting cold. We were all just broken people who'd been hurting each other for decades without even knowing it. Used to practice conversations with you, I said to Claire, the words coming out before I could stop them. When I was a teenager, I'd stand in front of my mirror and practice talking to you like we were friends. I'd imagine us laughing together, telling each other secrets, being actual sisters instead of whatever we are. What are we? Claire asked, and for the first time in years, she sounded like she actually wanted to know the answer. I don't know anymore. Tommy chose that moment to slip out of Mike's arms and walk over to me. He climbed into my lap, his little hands patting my tear-stained cheeks. Mommy, why is everyone sad at Christmas? How do you explain 28 years of miscommunication and buried guilt and misplaced love to a 6-year-old? Sometimes, baby, people forget how to talk to each other. And when that happens, everyone gets hurt, even when they don't mean to. Like when me and Jake fight about toys, but we don't really want to fight. Exactly like that. Tommy looked around the table at all the crying adults. So maybe everyone should say sorry and then have pie? Jake nodded seriously from Mike's lap. Pie makes everything better. And despite everything, the revelations, the tears, the 21 years of lies, and guilt and misunderstanding, I started to laugh. Not a bitter laugh or a sad laugh, but a real one. Because maybe my 6-year-old had just solved what the rest of us had spent decades making complicated. You know what? I said, looking at Claire, then at my parents, then back at Claire. Maybe. The boys are right. Maybe we should start with sorry. Claire was quiet for a long moment, her hands twisting in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Amber, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for tonight. And I'm sorry for everything. For making you feel small. For acting like I was better than you. For not seeing how hard you were trying to love me when I was too scared to love you back. It wasn't enough. 28 years of feeling inferior couldn't be erased with one apology. But it was a start. I'm sorry too, I said. For resenting you instead of trying to understand why you felt like you had to be perfect all the time. We looked at each other across the table, two women who'd spent their lives as strangers despite sharing the same childhood. But Dad wasn't done. He stood up again, walked around the table, and knelt beside my chair. Amber, I need you to know something. Every night for 21 years, I've regretted those 2 weeks. Not just the affair, but the time I lost with you. The trust I broke. The father I should have been but wasn't. His voice cracked. You're not the favorite because I was too guilty to show you how proud I am of who you've become. But sweetheart, you're the one I'm most proud of. The words I'd waited my whole life to hear. And they came wrapped in pain and confession and 21 years too late, but they came. I'm proud of your compassion, your strength, your dedication to your family and your patience. I'm proud that you chose love over bitterness, even when you had every right to be bitter. I'm proud that you're raising those boys to be kind and thoughtful, and nothing like the man I was 21 years ago. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe around the sob that was building in my chest. And Claire? Dad turned to my sister. I owe you an apology too. I turned you into my trophy instead of treating you like my daughter. I taught you that love had a price tag and that you had to earn affection instead of just receiving it because you existed. I'm sorry I was too broken. To love you both the way you deserved. Claire was crying again, but different tears now. Not tears of anger or confusion, but something that looked almost like relief. So what happens now? She asked. I looked around the table. At my parents, who'd been carrying secrets and guilt for over 2 decades. At my sister, who'd spent her life trying to be perfect enough to feel safe. At my husband, who'd watched all of this unfold while protecting our children from the worst of it. At my boys, who were still waiting patiently for pie and probably wondering why adults made everything so complicated. I don't know, I said honestly. But maybe we could try being honest with each other from now on. Maybe we could try being a real family instead of whatever we've been pretending to be. Claire nodded slowly. I'd like that. I don't know how to do it, but I'd like to try. We'll figure it out, Mom said, speaking for the first time since Dad's confession. It might take time, but we'll figure it out. And then Claire did something that shocked me more than anything else that had happened that night. She got up from her chair, walked around the table, and wrapped her arms around me and Tommy both. I love you, she whispered in my ear. I've always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it without feeling like I was giving up some kind of advantage. I hugged her back, this stranger sister who maybe, possibly, could become my friend. Love you too, I whispered back. Even when I didn't like you very much, I always loved you. We held each other like that for a long moment. 2 grown women crying over their children's heads while their parents watched, and their families started the long, complicated process of becoming real. But even as we reconciled, even as we started to heal, I could feel that there was still more to this story, still more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Because as we sat there, planning to try again, to be better, To be honest, I realized there was something else Dad hadn't told us yet. Something about the way Mom was avoiding eye contact, the way she kept glancing toward the hallway, toward the closet where she keeps all the family documents and old papers. Something about why, exactly, Dad's affair had ended so abruptly, and what had really happened during those 2 weeks when I was in the hospital. The real truth, I was starting to realize, was still waiting to be told. We were still holding each other, Claire and I, when I noticed Mom get up from the table. She moved quietly, like she was trying not to disturb this fragile moment of reconciliation, but there was something in her posture, something tense and purposeful, that made me watch her. She disappeared into the hallway, toward the coat closet where she's always kept what she calls her important papers. The same closet where she stores birth certificates, insurance documents, and apparently, secrets that have been waiting 21 years to see daylight. "Mom," I called after her, but she didn't answer. Dad was watching too now, his face pale. "Linda, don't what, Dad?" Claire asked, pulling back from our embrace. "What else is there?" Mom returned carrying a manila envelope, yellowed with age. Her hands were shaking as she set it on the table next to the broken wine glass that no one had bothered to clean up. "If we're being honest," Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper, "then we need to be completely honest." The temperature in the room dropped again. I thought we'd reached the bottom of the secrets, but apparently we'd only scratched the surface. "Mom, what is that?" I asked. "Letters," she said simply. "From the hospital. From during those 2 weeks." Dad stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "Linda, please. They don't need to know." "Yes, they do." Mom's voice was stronger now, determined. "Because what your father told you about why he came back, that's not the whole truth." My heart started racing. We'd just begun to heal, just started to understand each other, and now there was more? How many layers of deception could one family have? What do you mean? Claire asked. Mom opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. Hospital letterhead, doctor's notes, and something else. Handwritten letters in a child's messy scrawl. "You wrote these, Amber. While you were in the hospital, the nurses helped you when you were too weak to hold a pen properly." She handed me the first letter, and I recognized my 7-year-old handwriting immediately. Shaky, uncertain letters spelling out words that made my chest tight. "Read it out loud," Mom said gently. I cleared my throat, my voice breaking on the first few words. "Dear Daddy, I'm sorry I got sick. I'm sorry you can't come see me because you're busy. Claire told me it's because you have to work extra hard to pay for the hospital. I promise I'll get better fast so you don't have to work so much. I love you. Please don't be sad about the money. Love, Amber." The silence was deafening. Mike reached over and took my hand, squeezing tight. "There are 14 letters," Mom said. "You wrote one almost every day, all of them apologizing for being sick, all of them worried about being a burden, all of them trying to take care of everyone else even when you were the one fighting for your life." I looked at the stack of letters, my own childish handwriting blurry through my tears. "I don't understand. Why are you showing me these now?" "Because," Mom said, looking directly at Dad, "these letters are what really brought your father back. Not guilt about the affair, not some moment of clarity at your bedside. He came back because I mailed these to his office. Every single one of them." Dad sank into his fallen chair, his head in his hands. "I found out about the affair because she called the house," Mom continued, her voice steady now, like she'd been practicing this speech for 21 years. "His secretary. She was drunk, and she was angry that he kept talking about you when you were sick. She wanted to know when he was going to stop pretending to care about his family and just leave us already." "Mom," I whispered. "So I started mailing him your letters, one by one. I'd send them to his office with a note that said, 'This is what your daughter thinks about why you're not here. This is the story she's telling herself about your absence.' Dad's shoulders were shaking now. Linda, stop. The last letter I sent was the one you wrote the night your fever spiked. The night you almost died. Do you remember what you wrote, Amber? I shook my head. I didn't want to remember. Didn't want to know what my dying 7-year-old self had thought was important enough to write down. Mom pulled out the last letter, the paper more wrinkled than the others, stained with what looked like tears. I kept a copy. You wrote, "Dear Daddy, if I die tonight, please don't blame yourself. Please don't think it was because you were working too hard to come see me. I know you love me even when you can't be here. Tell Mommy and Claire I wasn't scared because I knew you were thinking about me somewhere. Love forever, Amber." The sound that came out of Dad was something between a sob and a wail. Raw, broken, inhuman. That's the letter that brought him back, Mom said. Not guilt about cheating. Not some noble realization about family. Fear that his 7-year-old daughter was going to die, believing that his absence was somehow her fault. I couldn't process it. Couldn't understand how the story kept getting worse, how every revelation peeled back another layer of pain. But why? I asked. Why are you telling us this now? Mom sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of her 59 years. Because for 21 years, I've watched your father try to buy forgiveness for the wrong sin. He's been trying to make up for the affair, for almost leaving us. But that's not what he needed forgiveness for. She looked at Dad, her eyes hard. Tell them, Robert. Tell them what you really need forgiveness for. Dad lifted his head, and I'd never seen anyone look so broken. I need forgiveness for letting my 7-year-old daughter almost die thinking she was a burden. For being so selfish, so wrapped up in my own wants, that I let her write those letters. I let her believe that my absence was about money, about work, about anything other than the fact that I was choosing another woman over my sick child. And, Mom prompted, and for lying about why I came back, for letting you both believe I had some moment of moral clarity when really I just couldn't live with the idea of you dying while thinking you weren't worth my time. The truth was uglier than the lie. In the lie, Dad was a man who'd made a mistake but found his way back to what mattered. In the truth, he was a man who'd been willing to let his child die alone until he realized she might die blaming herself for his abandonment. But you did come back, Claire said quietly. That has to count for something. Did I? Dad laughed bitterly. I came back to the hospital, yes. But I never really came back to Amber. I was too ashamed, too guilty about what those letters said, about who I was as a father. So instead of trying to rebuild a relationship with the daughter I'd almost lost, I poured all my attention into the daughter I hadn't failed yet. You failed me too, Claire said, and there was no anger in it, just sadness. You turned me into your do-over child, your chance to prove you weren't the man who almost let his daughter die alone. And what did that make me? I asked, the pieces finally clicking into place. The reminder of your worst moment, the evidence of who you really were when it mattered. Most? Dad nodded, tears streaming down his face. Every time I looked at you, I saw those letters. I saw that little girl apologizing for being sick, trying to take care of everyone else while she was dying, and I couldn't face it. So you threw money and gifts at Claire to prove you were a good father, and you kept me at arm's length so you wouldn't have to remember that you weren't, I said. Yes. The word hung between us like a death sentence. Mike cleared his throat. Can I say something? We all turned to him, this man who'd married into our dysfunction and somehow managed to love me despite all the baggage I carried from this family. I've been watching this family for 10 years, he said carefully, and I've seen how much pain you all carry. But I've also watched Amber become an incredible mother, because she knows what it feels like to worry that she's not worth her parents' time. I've watched her save lives at the hospital because she remembers what it felt like to fight for her own. And I've watched her love her patients' families through their worst moments because she knows what it's like to be scared and alone. He looked around the table. Your worst failure, Robert, created the most compassionate person I've ever met. That doesn't excuse what you did, but maybe it's worth something. Tommy, who'd been quietly listening to things he was way too young to understand, tugged on my sleeve. Mommy, are you sad because Grandpa was scared? Out of the mouths of babes. What do you mean, baby? Grandpa was scared that you didn't love him anymore because he made a mistake. Like when I break something, and I'm scared you'll be mad forever. I looked at my son, this wise little boy who'd somehow cut through 21 years of pain and confusion to find the simple truth underneath. You think Grandpa was scared? Tommy nodded solemnly. When people are scared, they do silly things. Like hide, or say mean things, or give too many presents. But if you hug them and tell them it's okay, they stop being scared. The adults around the table stared at this 6-year-old who'd apparently figured out what the rest of us had missed. Dad wasn't just guilty, he was terrified. Terrified that I'd never forgive him, terrified that he'd broken something that couldn't be fixed, terrified that his worst moment had defined him forever. I looked at Dad, really looked at him, and for the first time saw past the man who'd failed me to the man who'd been drowning in that failure for 21 years. Dad, I said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. He nodded. If you could go back, if you could change everything about those 2 weeks, would you? Yes. God, yes. In a heartbeat. What would you change? I'd end the affair before you got sick. I'd be at your bedside every day. I'd read to you and hold your hand and make sure you never ever thought that you weren't the most important thing in my world. And what about after? What would you change about the last 21 years? Dad was quiet for a long moment. I'd stop being afraid of you. Afraid of me? Afraid of your forgiveness. Afraid that if I got too close, you'd see exactly how much I'd failed you. Afraid that if I tried to be the father I should have been, you'd reject me for the father I wasn't. I stood up, walked around the table to where Dad was sitting. This broken man who'd spent over 2 decades punishing himself for the worst mistake of his life. Dad, look at me. He lifted his eyes, and I saw the scared man hiding behind all that guilt. I forgive you. The words came out easier than I expected, not because the hurt was gone. It would probably always be there, a scar across my childhood, but because carrying anger for 21 years was exhausting, and because my son was right. Sometimes people just need to know it's okay to stop being scared. I forgive you for the affair. I forgive you for not being there when I needed you. I forgive you for the 21 years of guilt and distance and making Claire your favorite to avoid dealing with me. I knelt beside his chair. But mostly, Dad, I forgive you for being human, for making terrible choices and spending half your life trying to make up for them in all the wrong ways. Dad collapsed forward, his arms around me, sobbing like a child. I'm so sorry, Amber. I'm so sorry. I know you are. Claire was crying again too, and after a moment she joined us, wrapping her arms around both of us. I'm sorry too, she whispered, for all of it. For not seeing how much you were hurting, for competing for love instead of sharing it, for being 31 years old and just now figuring out how to be your sister. Mom came over then, and for the first time in my memory, our whole family was holding each other. Not perfectly, not without pain, but honestly. Finally, honestly. When we broke apart, Tommy and Jake were standing beside us, looking concerned. Is everyone okay now? Jake asked. We're getting there, I said, wiping my eyes. It's going to take some time, but yeah, I think we're going to be okay. Good, Tommy said seriously. Because we still didn't have pie. And just like that, we were, laughing. All of us, through our tears, because children have this amazing ability to bring everything back to what really matters. We spent the rest of Christmas Day talking. Really talking, for maybe the first time ever. We talked about the letters, about the years of misunderstanding, about how we wanted things to be different moving forward. We talked about therapy, family therapy, individual therapy, all the therapy. Because 21 years of dysfunction doesn't get fixed in one afternoon. Claire and I made plans to have coffee the following week, just the two of us, to start figuring out how to be sisters instead of rivals. Dad promised to write me a letter, not an apology, but all the things he should have said over the years and never did. Mom admitted she'd been carrying her own anger about the affair and the lies, and that she needed to work through that, too. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We didn't magically become the perfect family, but for the first time in my life, we felt like a real family. Messy, complicated, damaged, but real. As we were cleaning up after dinner, our Christmas dinner, that had gone cold hours ago, but somehow tasted perfect when we finally got around to eating it, Claire pulled me aside. "Amber, can I ask you something?" "Sure. How do you do it? How do you love people so easily? Even me, even after everything?" I thought about it for a moment. "You know what's funny? I think it's because of those 2 weeks in the hospital. Being that scared, being that alone, it taught me that life's too short to hold on to anger, that everyone's just trying to figure it out, and most of the time we're all just scared kids pretending to be adults." Claire nodded slowly. "I want to learn how to do that." "You will. We'll figure it out together. And you know what? I think we will." As I'm recording this, it's been a week since Christmas dinner. Claire and I had coffee yesterday, and for the first time in our lives, we talked like friends. Really talked. She told me about the pressure she's always felt to be perfect, about how exhausting it is to live your whole life like you're auditioning for love. I told her about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, feeling like I wasn't good enough, about how I'd practiced conversations with her in the mirror because I wanted so badly for us to be close. Dad called me yesterday too, just to check on the boys and ask about my day at the hospital. It was awkward. 21 years of distance doesn't disappear overnight, but it was a start. And for the first time, when he said he was proud of me, I believed him. Mom and I are planning a girls' weekend next month. Just the two of us. She wants to tell me more about what those years were like for her, carrying all those secrets. I want to understand how she found the strength to keep our family together when everything was falling apart. We're all going to therapy, together and separately. Because Christmas dinner revelations are just the beginning. Real healing takes time and work and probably a lot more tears. But here's what I know now that I didn't know a week ago. I'm not the forgotten daughter. I never was. I was the daughter whose love was taken for granted because it never came with conditions. I was the daughter who stayed and fought and loved even when loving hurt, because that's who I chose to be. And Claire isn't the favorite daughter. She's the daughter who spent her whole life trying to earn something that should have been given freely. She's the daughter who carried the weight of our family's dysfunction, imperfectionism, and achievement, because she thought that was the only way to stay safe. We're both just daughters who deserved better from the adults who were supposed to protect us. And now, finally, we're all trying to do better. If you're watching this and you recognize your own family in our story, if you're the forgotten child or the golden child or the parent carrying 20 years of guilt, please know that it's never too late to tell the truth. It's never too late to forgive. It's never too late to start over. It won't be easy. Truth rarely is. But it's worth it. We're worth it. And so are you. This Christmas, our family didn't get a perfect ending. But for the first time in 28 years, we got a real beginning. And sometimes, that's exactly what you need. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here while I figured out how to forgive 21 years of hurt. And thank you for reminding me that I'm not alone in this messy, complicated business of being human. If this story touched you, if it helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, Please let me know in the comments below. Share your story if you want to. We're all just trying to figure it out together. And remember, you are worthy of love. Not conditional love, not love you have to earn or prove you deserve, but the kind of love that just is. The kind of love that doesn't keep score or play favorites or make you jump through hoops. The kind of love that maybe we can all learn to give each other. Merry Christmas, everyone. Even if it comes with broken wine glasses and 21 years of truth.